Here's how I bought a $2.25 million business for zero money down. Now, before I get into this, because I hate when people make this claim, it sounds like a bullshit claim, but how I actually was able to do it, it was because I already had a business in the same NAICS code, right? So let's just get that out of the way. That's not for everyone. Not everyone can do that. But because I already had a business that was very similar to the acquisition target, I was able to do it for $0 down. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can do it for as little as 5% down, which isn't unheard of. And you can definitely do that without having an existing business in the same industry. But if you do have a business in the same industry, then yeah, you can do it for $0 down. Something that most of the gurus out there aren't going to tell you, but that's how you actually do it. So I'm going to show you how you can find deals, how we were able to source this deal, how we were able to structure this deal so that it was an advantageous deal. Ultimately, we did end up pulling out of this deal, and I'll preface that before I dive into this. The main reason being is because the Q1 financials came back very, very soft, and it was a lot more seasonal than we thought it was. So because of that, we pulled out. So soft that they came back negative for Q1. And that's even before we stacked debt payments on top of that. So that would have put the business even further in the hole. So ultimately, it wasn't a sustainable business, although in their high seasons, it was probably very, very solid. But even the high seasons wouldn't account for the fact that the business would be bleeding money in the off season. So, a little bit of blood in the off season would be supposedly okay. But this was very, very bloody. So ultimately, we pulled that out of the deal. But I digress. So how were we actually able to find the deal? Number one, was actually off market. It was kind of off market, but on market. What I mean by off market is the brokers actually came to us. So, I've been buying businesses for a couple years now and have made a little bit of a name in the space. So just having talked to a massive amount of brokers, the brokers actually reached out to us and brought us the deal. And they talked to one of my board members. Board members called me up and hopped on a call. And within about 24 hours, we had a letter of intent sent over to them. And here's how we structured the deal. So we structured the deal was $2.25 million total. And so what we did, the business came with $1.5 million in real estate and $750,000 for the business itself. The reason the business was so heavily discounted is very, very low multiple, and it ended up being like a 2.5 times multiple. They were doing something in the ballpark of about $400,000 a year in free cash flow or EBITDA minus the depreciation. So, for the most part, pretty decently healthy, strong business. It was sufficient enough to cover the debt payments on the entire, debt. And then here's how we structured it. So we did 1.5 for the real estate. We did the $750,000 on a seller note and carried that back 2 years. We do a 2-year standby and a 10-year amortization at, I believe it was 5 or 6% interest rate. The large debt payment would come from the real estate itself, but that would be amortized over 30 years rather than 10 years, which would be a more traditional SBA note. So this is amortized over 30 years at a prime plus 2. So at the time, it would have been about a 10% interest rate. So pretty steep interest rate, but prime rates are adjustable. So supposedly that would go down as the years go on, and that would be a little bit more of a favorable interest rate. But at the time, it was about a 10 or 11% interest rate. And so the 1.5 million on the real estate would have been the big enchilada, and then the 750 on the seller note would have been we probably would have paid that off early, or just at the time, or when we decided to finish the roll-up strategy and exit. But yeah, so that was the deal structure. And so Yeah, and then how we were able to actually convince them of this is they wanted us to do it as two separate transactions, one for just the real estate and one for the business, and not even have the SBA know about the business and just do the acquisition on the real estate. Ultimately, you can't really lie to your lenders and mislead them and tell them that these things don't exist when clearly they do. And they also need to see that there's cash flow sufficient to cover the real estate. And especially because it's something directly tied to the real estate, right? So obviously this business is doing business within this piece of property. So, that business is directly tied to that piece of real estate, right? You can't necessarily separate the two and lie to your lenders or to the SBA and tell them that these things don't exist, which is ultimately what they wanted us to do, probably because they knew that the Q1 financials would come back massively soft and, not look good, which they did. And so that was how we structured the deal. And again, the sellers went for that because they liked the idea of us splitting up the notes and splitting up the business into two different acquisitions. And essentially, they still would be two separate transactions because the real estate would go into an umbrella of a real estate LLC property company, and then the business itself, because it was an asset sale, not a stock sale, so we wouldn't be inheriting their EIN or any of their potential legal issues or anything like that. And because it was an asset purchase, the existing target would just get dissolved, and then it would get merged in with an LLC that we set up that would essentially have a DBA as the target corporation's business name. So once the acquisition would have gone through, then, like I said, the target would get dissolved and then the new LLC would take its place. So long story short, there would still be two separate transactions, one for the real estate, one for the business, going into two separate LLCs. And so at the end of the day, it's still two separate transactions, but we decided to group it all up into essentially one loan, which is an SBA 7A. Traditionally, real estate can be SBA, I believe it's 501. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe it's SBA 501 for real estate specifically. But we were looking at SBA 7A. So that's pretty much essentially how we're able to structure the deal, and again, do this for zero money down. So because we had the existing business, we could do this for zero down. If we didn't, we probably would have done either 5, but at the most it would be 10, even with the real estate. Traditionally, real estate is 10% on the real estate, so we'd be looking at 150,000 down to do this whole thing. And on the real estate side, if it was a 501, but again, because we had an existing business, we could do an expansion loan and then it becomes zero down. If we didn't, it would have been 5. So then we'd be looking at around $115,000 down for the actual entire company with the business and the real estate both together on the $2.25 million deal. So 5% of that would be $115,000. So we would have to either, raise that or just, empty the bank account and put the money into the deal. So yeah, that's essentially how you can buy businesses for 0 or 5% down. Again, like I said, ultimately we ended up pulling out of this deal, and thankfully we did. And but it was a good, learning experience to go through that. And so the M&A space is an interesting place to play in. So whether you're looking for additional businesses to bolt on or to enter different marketplaces, could potentially be a good space to enter into. So yeah, ultimately it was still a solid business, but the financials didn't track. Then lenders get spooked, and we as investors and buyers get spooked. So at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. That's not to say we couldn't turn the business around, but I think we made a good financial decision on this one. So yeah, hopefully you like this video. Hit the like button. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, and talk soon.